Haus Labs has now gone through 3 lifetimes to finally get it right. And there's a very clear reason as to why. From the original perfume to the 3rd iteration of the company, truly a significant amount has changed behind the scenes. But it was certainly a rocky road to the start line. Haus Labs originally launched in 2012 under the name Haus Laboratories. However, this was long anticipated after Marketing UK leaked the news in 2010 that this would be a fragrance line, which it was, a partnership with Coty, which it was, though Coty did make a statement about that to debunk this as a rumor at the time, and that it would have a huge marketing budget, which it also did. The only thing that the article got wrong is that it would have been out by Christmas 2010. As in actual reality, we were forced to wait patiently until it was actually released 2 years later in August 2012. The product was novel, being that it was the first black perfume. The marketing of the brand was spectacular. The video from Stephen Klein well captivated the whole Born This Way era that was at its height. The way they spoke about the fragrance in things like press releases was refreshingly dark and, especially in the lead up, quite naughty with what they claimed would be in the proposed ingredients. Not that I can mention what that bodily fluid is on YouTube. And the distribution was interesting as well. It was in museums like the Guggenheim, as well as locations that were more accessible, like Macy's. And in the UK, if I remember correctly, it was in Boots, House of Fraser, and Selfridges. Probably more. That's just from my memory of being British. So the launch was strong, and as a result, apparently it became the 2nd fastest selling celebrity fragrance of all time, second only to Chanel No. 5, after selling 6 million bottles. I'm personally taking that figure with a grain of salt, just as the reference for that figure is only her own tweet from what I can see, but it is certainly possible given the incredible marketing and her incredible fan base at the time, as well as the fact that this was just at the absolute height of her fame. However, it seems the continued sales that one usually expects from fragrance may not have materialized. Reviews weren't conclusively the best. Obviously, some people loved it, and I am singling out negative reviews here, which I do know is a bit unfair. But in general, there was a consensus of 4 main complaints. Either it was similar to other fragrances like Black Opium, Tom Ford, or Viktor and Rolf Good Fortune, that its edgy promise didn't live up to the sweet scent of the fragrance. Simply, people didn't like it after their initial purchase, as some don't, or they were just buying it to have it, and they never really wanted the perfume, they never actually intended to use it. So while on paper it looks like this initial launch was really successful, especially within the launch, having these 4 complaints may go to explain why the follow-up fragrance Eau de Gaga in 2014 was done at a significantly smaller release, which meant that despite it getting far better reviews, just kind of flopped. Haus Laboratories, in its first iteration, eventually just went quiet, and we, as her audience, were left to wait. 5 years passed before any public news. But in the background, movements were being made, and as of very late 2017, early 2018 time, both Haus Labs and Haus Beauty were trademarked by Gaga, and the hashtags were teased on her Instagram as well. All before what I believe was actually a new company, but with the remaining Haus Laboratories' original name, was announced as co-founded between Ben Jones, who was previously of The Honest Company, and obviously Lady Gaga. Eventually, the brand was officially announced in 2019 with the teasing of a launch of Haus Laboratories as a cosmetics line, notably without a fragrance, but with Amazon. And excitement was genuinely high. This was very novel for the time. It was the first major cosmetics brand to launch with an exclusivity deal with Amazon, which for Haus Laboratories meant that it wasn't a licensed deal, nor was it a joint venture, as is common for other celebrity brands, meaning that Gaga would have the volition over the products that they wanted to sell. Something that to Gaga fans read as freedom for her to be a bit wilder than the watered-down idea that the fragrance ended up being. It also adds a whole aspect to the authenticity of the brand, which did set expectations high. While for Amazon, it meant that they could tout themselves as an incubator for beauty brands in the same way brands like Seed Beauty worked for Colourpop and Kylie Cosmetics by incubating these brands for a direct-to-consumer model. However, they weren't really competing with brands like Seed Beauty because Amazon had already merged the incubator model with a much larger scale retail outlet. And so really, their competitors became like Sephora with their incubator Kendo, who'd already launched brands like Kat Von D, Marc Jacobs, who I don't have a video on, and Fenty Beauty. For this reason, having that one big celebrity brand at launch had incredible value to Amazon. It would guarantee early sales, and it would help to legitimize themselves in a space that they really didn't have much of a foot in before. They were incubating other brands at this time as well, so people like Belle Eye, who I believe are now defunct. But to have an immediate draw of millions of people, as Gaga could provide through her fan base, held enormous value, both monetarily and in estimated monetary value, through both promotion and to other brands. For example, because Haus Laboratories effectively would function like an anchor store, it would bring beauty enthusiasts onto Amazon, where they may stop and buy something else while browsing. It had more value than just the product of Haus Laboratories itself. So, naturally, Amazon went really in on this launch, gearing up for a two-step hard launch, in which on Prime Day in July, they opened up pre-orders on 3 products. There was the Rip Lip Liner, the Le Riot Lip Gloss, and the Glam Attack All Over Shimmer Powder, which were exclusively for Prime customers to pre-order, and that also came with a little free makeup bag, though nothing would be sent until the official launch in September, at which time they also expanded on their ranges of things like liners, glosses, and shimmer powders, while adding eyeliner and face stickers. However, as you can see from this graph, much like the perfume before it, the launch was absolutely massive. In fact, it made $141 million, so the launch itself was never the problem. And instead, the problem was the following period that really paled to keep up that momentum that they created in the very beginning. Obviously, it's normal to have the lion's share of popularity be on this big launch day like this, but this level of discrepancy was worrisome for the ongoing health of the company. Actually, it was detrimental to Haus Labs as a company. To adequately explain why, I will be using my favorite 4 Ps that I don't think I've used in a while, and I'll be largely ignoring the price only because at $20 for eyeliner, $36 for 2 powders, $32 for 2 glosses, while $26 was for 2 liners, the price was accessible, good for her audience, and in my opinion, it was quite well advised. The other rather obvious P would be place, so this refers to the place of sale, which, considering that it was an exclusivity deal with Amazon, largely draws back to what I said about them using her fame as an anchor, which for Amazon is a great thing, but for Haus Labs itself doesn't seem to have been that beneficial. I mean, Haus Laboratories did intend to go the direct-to-consumer route anyway, as it was a founding concept for the brand because it was a less competitive market. But of course, it was a bit of a mistake because it didn't allow customers that were on the fence to try the makeup or to experience the makeup at all before putting down their money. Traditionally, that would have been fine with much cheaper D2C brands like ColourPop or the purposefully overhyped and understocked Kylie Cosmetics, but because this is Amazon and they don't tend to lean towards that scarcity marketing tactic, and genuinely they don't have a great reputation for quality in general, it didn't drive urgency to the brand, which meant that they were having trouble spinning this online exclusive into a positive thing. Then you add to that the fact that most people are kind of skeptical to new celebrity launches. That would have also offered another much unneeded barrier to entry. As Ben Jones, the co-founder, says in this interview, quote, "It was pure naivete, pure ignorance." For product, starting with glosses, shimmer powders, and liners was good. They are all universal products, and I haven't seen an overtly bad review of the actual product at all, I don't believe. So product-wise, no problems. But the packaging that the product came in was not well planned, and that also links into the promotion. Obviously, a celebrity brand is very dependent on a celebrity's perception in the public. This packaging would have been great for her Alejandro Born This Way era when she was a bit darker, a bit edgier, around the same time that the perfume had come out many years prior. But I don't know if you remember, at the very end of 2016, and then through most of 2017, if not all of 2017, She had herself gone through a bit of a rebranding with the Joanne album, 2016, and her documentary 5'2" in 2017. This was a very large push to humanize her to more people than just her fan base, making her a bit softer in her public image. So why, then, was the 2019 makeup line so heavily outside of that? Considering this is a celebrity makeup line, which was primarily vying for sales through her celebrity endorsement, with the formulas being secondary to the customer, it either makes the previous Joanne branding look inauthentic, or it makes the current makeup inauthentic. Plus, strangely, within only months of the beauty launch, Gaga would have a new visual once again with the Chromatica album just 8 months later. Honestly, it makes me wonder why they didn't just wait and release the makeup maybe with Chromatica packaging at the same time. They seem to have missed a really easy tie-in there, and part of me wonders if it was Amazon's timing to fit in with Prime Day, while Gaga maybe couldn't speed up the lead track because it was a duet with Ariana Grande, or something else that we don't know about in the music industry. Either way, it wasn't a positive for the overarching Gaga brand, because when it was released, it was already dated to her then current Joanne branding, and then was further dated by another rebrand after the Joanne. So it would have been 2 Gaga iterations before, within only 8 months of launch. The other aspect of promotion that's worth discussing, however, is the heavy emphasis Amazon was putting on the brand in their own store. In this interesting article from Marketplace Pulse, they discuss how much screen space was dedicated to the Gaga brand, with the banner and the premium locations on the cosmetics homepage. This is obviously enormously valuable, equal to when brands pay for the eyeline spot in Sephora, because just getting in front of consumers' eyes will encourage some to buy. And realistically, Amazon also needed to benefit from having this brand as their biggest draw. These sales would make their new venture look like a success. However, unfortunately, because the promotion was so heavily weighted in this way, it doesn't seem to have been able to keep up like sales following Amazon's preferential treatment. It skewed metrics, made the juxtaposition between launch and post-launch very stark, and it didn't make either Amazon nor Haus Labs look overly good. To pull the 4 Ps together, it just seems that the initial brand couldn't work because though the formulas and the price was good, the restrictive place and the dated branding and marketing just didn't offer enough added value to encourage those initial customers to jump over all of the barriers. Thus, why we see that huge dip of popularity post-launch, because some of those people that were on the fence perhaps couldn't have been convinced. However, while I say all of this in hindsight, interestingly, it was noticeable at that time within the company already, as Ben Jones has stated on multiple times that they began the incoming rebrand, or the evolution as he once put it, only a year after the Amazon launch. He says that he worked on it for 2 years in this 2022 interview, and in the Consumer VC interview from 2022, he also confirms this 2-year timeline and even went as far as to stop himself before saying an exact date, before then saying that they got a whole new team to spearhead a rebrand. Something he expands on in this interview with CEW, where he says, quote, "We have 20 plus new team members, 4 newly rebuilt departments, product development, packaging, marketing, creative, 4 new vice presidents, 2 new senior directors, and 40 plus employees, all with deep and wide expertise in beauty, retail, and innovation." The one person in all of those 40 plus talented employees that I do want to point out is the new Chief Marketing Officer, Kelly Collar, who joined in March 2021, coming from a background in developing brands with Sephora Originals before it was called Kendo. So it was very clearly obvious internally that longevity for the brand with Amazon was not looking good. However, massive credit goes out to them because they did not waste 1 second. After only a year with Amazon, they began to rejig literally the whole business to rectify the mistakes made by the previous team. This began to be visually noticeable outwards to the public with a test run of new packaging style and new marketing technique with the 2021 release of Love for Sale, which was a palette directly linked to the release of her 2021 album with Tony Bennett of the same name. Now, based on things Gaga has said herself, I was initially going to credit this to Kelly Collar, CMO, and Sarah Tano, who has developed products for the brand since the Amazon launch. However, since then, I have been very fortunate enough to have had lunch with Nicola Formichetti, so that's Gaga's frequent collaborator / creative director on projects and current creative consultant to Haus Labs. And he was actually really surprised to hear that Gaga had said those things, because from his inside and very close perspective, he said that she herself is very, very hands-on with both the product and the branding / marketing. And he also said that Gloria Ryu, who's the chief product officer, was instrumental in the product development as well. So I think in those interviews of Gaga, she was just being very humble and giving flowers to her team, when from what I hear, it actually seems much more collaborative with her included. Because considering this was the first acknowledgement from the brand that the current Gaga, as opposed to a previous iteration, would be what the selling point was going to be for the cosmetics, this was a huge improvement brought through by the team. This one palette visualizes a noticeable shift in the thinking of the company. However, while this change of pace was a great signal of what was to come, it was painfully short-lived. You see, only 9 months later came the infamous rebrand that has brought us Haus Labs by Lady Gaga today. Now, this rebrand was done in partnership with Sephora, who, as discussed, have a very strong history of creating new brands or even discovering young brands and fostering them into the world in a way that makes them desirable. And Haus Labs was no exception to that second part. The entire branding of the company changed. They changed the name of the brand to Haus Labs, a much easier name to say in general. They added by Lady Gaga at the end to make it crystal clear, even to those that may not know, that she does in fact have her own brand. They simplified the packaging enormously, giving it a more modern feel. And instead of just focusing on one Gaga era, which would work with most celebrities, let's be honest, they actually worked around her often changing visual persona. What they did was instead they distilled Gaga into a singular word, creativity, I'm guessing, and built a brand around that, as opposed to a particular era of Gaga. Genius. This way, it allowed Gaga to be the queen of the brand, as opposed to having a brand follow and be dependent on her own personal fame. Yet because that creative element has always been such a core to her own personal brand, this actually says Lady Gaga much more so than the passing dark edgy branding that the original perfume and cosmetic line had. This offers a huge improvement on the branding in general and offers longevity and authenticity as a brand, even if Gaga wasn't there to spearhead it. In short, the original branding aimed to commercialize her fame, whereas this built a world around her distilled core in which she could be the visual apex. The first was fame backwards, the second was constructivist and adding Gaga. Literally, the only thing I think this rebrand missed the mark on was this mint green color that was rather common among the ads and the displays. Personally, I would have either had it in white, which may run the risk of being comparable to Drunk Elephant, so maybe not, or silver, which, because Rebrand cosmetics didn't exist then, I think was probably a better choice than the mint. But for me, to have come to that amount of small little detail, that nitpicking, shows how well conceived the visual language of this rebrand was. Or is, I suppose. The product too was good, with brow pencils, a 51-shade foundation range, lipstick, highlighters, lip oil, eyeliner, and bronzer, all together with their hero product, which were these pigment paints that were good for the eyes, cheeks, and lips, clearly to push that creativity aspect of the brand. And it was also cruelty-free, clean, and infused with skincare elements, so it just followed all the trends at the time, really expanded on the product range, and kind of gave everybody what they would need as basics in order to be able to express their own creativity. It was really strong. The price remained in the affordable range too, and the promotion in terms of print were just modernized, while the online promotion included things like more influencer work and promotional videos on Sephora's own platforms. Effectively, they took all of the drawbacks of the previous makeup brand and just rectified them, all while offering customers a way to actually try on the makeup in Sephora stores to further encourage that element of creative experimentation that the brand was pushing so hard. You see, while tangibility is an enormous motivator to spend in any brand, for a brand that's trying to encourage play and creativity, it poses an even more important role. Naturally, this was an extremely successful relaunch of the brand. Consumer reception was phenomenal. People really understood the need for this rebrand, and as a result, by 2023, it was selling in all the stores across the US and Canada, expanding into the UK when they launched the whole Sephora brand in the UK in 2023 as well. And yet, while I say all of this, that the rebrand was phenomenal at distilling the essence of Gaga into marketable cosmetics, and honestly, I probably could just end the video there. I actually am really excited to discuss something that Ben Jones says right at that tail end of the interview that I've referenced a few times, where he says they are looking to disrupt the industry by introducing soft launches to beauty. So he likens this to his background in gaming, where randomly selected people can be chosen from a lot, like a lottery, to test the game and give thoughts and feedback. I personally don't know of another similar scheme in beauty currently. I know that some brands have worked with influencers as consultants, but he's very specifically talking about fans who would be chosen at random, not just because of their online reach. Just to be clear, for the Haus Labs brand, this also has not happened yet, and I did actually ask Nicola about this, and he said there aren't any internal discussions about it either. Not that it couldn't be in the future, but there isn't any that he knows of yet. But I do think it's worth discussing just as a concept, because it evidences the desire within the company to innovate and disrupt as much as possible. There are enormous positives and negatives to this idea. To remove the hard launch would be quite the disruption to beauty in general. You'd imagine it would work towards a better quality of product, and it would also increase loyalty enormously for those who were lucky enough to be participants. However, this would also open them up to the risk of counterfeiting or stealing, even if they had NDAs. And of course, there is the cost risk of sending demos, which would need to be tested as extensively as an actual launch. And then, of course, the cost of actually sending out all of these demos to the people that were lucky enough to be in the lottery. And yet, if they do manage to do this or something similar, hypothetically, it opens them up to a level of discourse, transparency, honesty in cosmetics that we simply don't have currently. Imagine if this whole event was shown on social media. The chosen few would be totally free to give genuinely honest opinions. We would get to see more of an insight into the creation of a brand or a product. Maybe the people in the lottery would be able to pick a name for a shade here and there. Maybe they even get a shade pulled because no one likes it and they're just open and honest about that. My mind literally boggles about how interestingly fresh and honest this idea could be for Haus Labs especially, but really for any brand, because we don't have that transparency currently. We don't have that dialogue in any brand. So for Ben to have been able to rethink, reconceptualize the entire R&D, distribution and promotion of cosmetics in this way is just so genius in a way that has me genuinely enraptured. I find this really an exciting idea. Of course, like I said, they haven't done this yet, and Nicola did tell me that he doesn't know of this being a deeper conversation in the company. So it is a lot my projection onto the brand. However, with this kind of thinking coming from Ben, with the incredible world building that's coming from people like Gaga, Nicola and Kola, even with the product development of Rue, it seems that all of these pieces are in place for an ongoingly interesting brand that's actively looking to disrupt the industry. This makes me more excited about Haus Labs than it does about most brands because of how actively they want to make their brand genuinely creative and pushing boundaries. I really genuinely look forward to where the brand will go in the future because of this. I'm so curious to see if they'll take that creative aspect and build creative seasons within it, or if they'll just continue to try and disrupt the R&D side that I got carried away explaining, or maybe they'll get rid of that mint green that I nitpickingly didn't love as part of the current rebrand. Either way, the possibilities really do seem to be wide for Haus Labs, and I cannot wait to see where it goes. When you base yourself this genuinely In creative expression, not even the sky is the limit. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe. If you're into fashion, feel free to check out my fashion channel over here. And a special thank you goes out to my patrons over on Patreon, some of whose names are on the screen now. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.